INTJs. If you're either a conspiracy theorist or such an introvert that you may look emotionally constipated, there's a good chance you're one of them. My name is Julius Caesar, and this is a series where I base myself on a theory that compares psychiatric disorders with the dysfunctional looping of the 16 personalities. And in the case of INTJs, that loop can lead this type to something similar to a paranoid personality. INTJs, much like INFJs, can spend a lot of time inside their own heads, detached from reality, detached from life and physical sensations, or even from facts themselves. And consequently, because of this excess of introversion, and unlike INFJs, not having functions that help them build a strong repertoire in the social world and the external world outside their heads, they can become extremely naive people, a very common trait among FI users, introverted feeling, especially INFPs, for example. But instead of crying, asking for help, and becoming dependent like INFPs would, INTJs take the complete opposite path. They become isolated, resentful, and even vengeful, planning either to the destruction of the world or the destruction of their enemies and people who, in the INTJ's eyes, betray them. Resentment and revenge are two very common words in the vocabulary of the dysfunctional INTJ, precisely because of this paranoid nature, whether due to past experiences or simply a lack of exposure to reality, a lack of concrete data, a lack of extroversion. They may avoid creating meaningful relationships with other people, avoid exposing their weaknesses and vulnerabilities. It's like that drawing of the pink ball that one day decides to leave its box, gets punched, and instead of simply learning and becoming stronger, it retreats inward, arms itself, and plans to throw an atomic bomb at those who hurt it. Ironically enough, Robert Oppenheimer was an INTJ too. But it's not as if INTJs were always villains. Oppenheimer himself had a very strong sense of morality and bitterly regretted creating the bomb and killing the Japanese. He ended up becoming an anti-war activist for practically the rest of his life. And this shows that unlike ENTJs, INTJs do have a moral sense, and they can be very deeply sensitive. After all, they are probably the most sensitive type among all of the thinker types. But at the same time, precisely because of FI, much like the XXFP types, the INTJ has a moral duality, a black and white way of seeing life and people, either as good or evil, right or wrong, all in a deeply tied to the INTJ's personal morality, which may make very little sense to people around them. Personally, I'd say that INTJs can be somewhat childish when making these kinds of judgments. After all, every tertiary function is, in another theory as well, a sort of childish function, underdeveloped compared to the dominant and auxiliary functions. And in the case of INTJs, this is what creates great megalomaniacs, moral judges, and evil people detached from reality who want to twist the world and other people to fit what the INTJ believes is right and wrong, instead of adapting themselves to that. These are people like Karl Marx, who saw only the proletariat as good and the bourgeoisie as evil, and who value destroying half of society just to achieve a social homeostasis. Or Ted Krasinski, the Unabomber, who wanted to destroy all of society so we could rebuild it from scratch and thus end depression and the lack of meaning in the world. Something that was actually more of an internal thing to him than external, probably. Or, of course, Thanos, who also wanted to destroy half the population of the universe because in his mind it would improve the world. So you can see that the NI creates an idealism, much like INFJs, of a perfect society, a perfect world, or perfection itself. But Because of FI, INTJs end up entering this loop of judging everything emotionally rather than logically or rationally. People and actions become good or bad, right and or wrong, and there ends up being very little room for flexibility. Despite being intuitive types, I'd say that INTJs are probably the least open to other people's ideas and experiences among all intuitives. Open-minded types, they are open to the ideas that they themselves possess, but those ideas are often deeply tied to this emotional factor rather than a logical one sometimes. This is what makes the INTJ think that they can be betrayed at any moment because of these FI values they hold so tightly. If they believe something can hurt them or contradict what they already believe through an I, then they need to distance themselves from it, judge it, or even protect themselves from that, from anything that could change the INTJ's worldview. For them, the idealism that they possess is already perfect. So anything that dares challenging it becomes something either to be destroyed or avoided. And all of this comes through this paranoia of the INTJ, the NI plus FI loop, strongly turning them into conspiracy theorists, always believing that they are going to be robbed, attacked, or betrayed by people everywhere they look. They are chronically distrustful of other people and their intentions, always believing they themselves know the truth. But all of this happens because of a lack of extroverted functions. Here, TE, the extroverted thinking, which should gather information and facts from reality to show the INTJ how these intuitions and ideas they possess and these values can be often wrong, as well as SE, which is the extroverted sensing, which is precisely about adapting to the present moment instead of projecting a desire and distant future. It's basically seeing life as it is instead of how you would like it to be. INTJs can lose their entire lives waiting to achieve distant future plans that often never become a reality. This is what Friedrich Nietzsche, another INTJ, called otherworldliness, or the Überwelt. Überwelt, sorry for the American accent. People who spend their lives waiting for the kingdom of heaven and consequently lose the daily bread of life here on earth, living for the future while sacrificing life in the present. Again, this comes from a lack of extroverted function, especially SE, which is about immediacy, about living in the now instead of the internal future plans, like seeing reality as it is instead of how you would like it to be. And ironically enough, Nietzsche himself lived this way, and a large part of his philosophy is precisely about saying, look people, I live this way and now I'm telling you to live differently. It might actually be preferable. He always imagined himself becoming a great philosopher, being recognized for his books and incredible ideas, but he struggled to express himself outwardly. And because of this black and white moralism, he created a lot of resentment, envy, and desire for revenge toward people like Lua, Andreas, Salome, who romantically rejected him, or his friend Richard Wagner, about whom he wrote at least 2 books just to criticize him after feeling betrayed as well. But again, people don't have much control over their loops, and Nietzsche himself knew how harmful it could be to think and live this way. That's why he wrote one of his greatest books based on this exact issue, Beyond Good and Evil, where he discusses the relativization of morality and ethics themselves, how clinging to the dogmas of what you believe can become an obstacle to truly living your life. And in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he shows how a higher man, the Übermensch, is not merely someone who lives only for the future, but someone who learns to use their animal instincts, that which has always existed within animals, and consequently within human beings as well. The idea of focusing only on your head, only on intellect, is a massive mistake. Nietzsche was a great critic of the excessive intellectualism of living entirely inside one's own mind, because again, he himself was very, very much like that. And as he writes, suppose I have the key to your chains, why should I lock my lock and yours be the same? In other words, he shows how other people, especially other INTJs, could live a better life based on the life he himself lived and later realized could have been better. And in the case of INTJs, the solution is to let go of this excessive FI morality, this obsession with good and evil, right and wrong, and adapt more toward TE. Say whatever you want about Marx, he was an excellent writer, just like Nietzsche was as well. They externalize their thoughts through writing and work. One of my favorite INTJs, for example, is Vini Art. This guy is incredible, and he's also Brazilian, just like me. And just like every INTJ, he talks about always having dream of becoming a great artist, of still planning to create art galleries, exhibitions, and art books. And the way he achieves these things is through work. The guy is extremely pragmatic. He sells his arts all over the world. Germany, Los Angeles, Japan. Like many functional INTJs, he's deeply work-oriented, very conscientiousness. He takes those NI ideas and gives them form through work. That's TE, and does it in a physical, sensorial way. Art is sensorial in a sense. It's something that can be experienced physically, therefore, which to me is an example of SE, the extroverted sensing as well. And again, instead of living only for the future, he puts things into practice here and now, living within the flow of life and work. And these are exactly the things that Nietzsche valued and that I believe INTJ could benefit from. Instead of remaining trapped, fearing that the external world might change your idealism, paranoid that people may betray you, accept that your idealism still has much to gain and improve if you simply experience more of reality. Let go of excessive morality. Go beyond good and evil. Live the present. Expose yourself. Express yourself outwardly, if not through words, then at least through your work. Another INTJ that I admire very much is Heidegger, and he talks basically that, to live, that life isn't that which is in your head, but that which is outside. This is phenomenology. Heidegger was very into also the idea of das Nichts, which is just, seeing the void, seeing nothingness. Sartre was also a very fan of Heidegger and wrote this book, Being in Nothingness, which is basically these ideas of, let go, man. Just live life and just be yourself. And consequently, instead of fearing people and relationships, you create bonds with that through this breach of work, whether through artistic drawings or incredible ideas and philosophies. The INTJ just becomes healthier when he lets go of this morality and simply expresses himself and put himself out in the world. And that's it. My name is Julius Caesar. If you are an INTJ and want a more personal consultation, I promise it's completely confidential and trustworthy. Click the link in the description and we can schedule a session. Bye-bye.